Welcome to Legacy Chronicles. Today, we dive into the dark and devastating history of the top 10 most brutal wars in history. These aren't just sterile statistics or dates on a timeline. These are conflicts that devoured entire generations, leaving scars on humanity that haven't healed. So buckle up, this is not for the faint of heart. Let's get started. The year is 1939. The world watches as a dark cloud spreads across Europe, marking the beginning of World War II. From the beaches of Normandy to the frozen plains of the Eastern Front, this war knew no bounds. Over 70 million souls perished, victims of a conflict that consumed the very air we breathe. Imagine entire cities reduced to rubble by relentless bombing campaigns. And then there's the dawn of the atomic age, with two mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War II was more than a war. It was a cataclysm, a rupture in history that continues to echo through the decades. It was supposed to be the war to end all wars. A conflict so devastating that humanity would never again dare to tread the path of such destruction. They called it the Great War. But the bitter irony of that name became apparent soon enough. The scale of the conflict was unprecedented, engulfing nations and empires in a relentless struggle. World War I, a conflict born from the ashes of empires, a clash of ideologies, a testament to the folly of mankind. It was a war that saw the old world order crumble and a new uncertain era begin. This wasn't the mobile, fast-paced war of World War II. This was trench warfare. Soldiers lived and died in the mud, facing the constant threat of enemy fire, disease, and the elements. Picture millions of men facing each other across a desolate no-man's land, caught in a brutal stalemate. The ground between the trenches was a deadly expanse, littered with barbed wire and the remnants of failed offensives. New horrors emerged: machine guns, poison gas, and the stench of death and decay. The war introduced weapons of mass destruction that changed the nature of combat forever. Over 20 million souls were lost, many of them young men barely old enough to shave. The human cost was staggering, leaving families and nations in mourning. The war to end. All wars solved nothing, leaving behind a world shattered and broken. The seeds of future conflicts were sown in the ruins, ensuring that peace would be fleeting and fragile. The year is 1850. Deep within the heart of China, a rebellion is brewing. This is the story of the Taiping Rebellion. At the heart of this maelstrom stands Hong Xiuquan, a failed scholar who declared himself the younger brother of Jesus Christ. He preached a bizarre mix of Christianity and traditional Chinese beliefs, promising his followers a heavenly kingdom of great peace. What followed was a brutal civil war, a 14-year struggle that engulfed much of China. Massacres were commonplace, cities were put to the torch, and the rivers ran red with blood. Estimates vary, but somewhere between 20 and 30 million people perished in the Taiping Rebellion. From the steppes of Central Asia, a storm erupted, a tempest of horseflesh and steel that would sweep across continents. This was the Mongol conquests, a century of warfare that reshaped the map of Eurasia. At the heart of this maelstrom was Genghis Khan, uniting the disparate Mongol tribes into an unstoppable fighting force. From China in the east to Europe in the west, the Mongol war machine seemed invincible. Cities that resisted were put to the sword, their populations decimated. The cost in human life was staggering. Estimates range from 30 to 40 million dead. Picture the year 1803. Across Europe, a new era is dawning, an era of revolution and upheaval led by Napoleon Bonaparte. From the battlefields of Italy to the frozen wastelands of Russia, Napoleon's armies marched. For over a decade, Europe became a chessboard, with Napoleon playing the role of grandmaster. The Napoleonic Wars left an estimated 3.5 to 6 million dead. These weren't just soldiers, but civilians caught in the crossfire. In the end, Napoleon's empire crumbled, but the wars reshaped Europe and transformed military tactics. The year is 1950. The world, still reeling from World War II, finds itself on the brink of a new conflict, the Korean War. This was a war marked by its brutality, its bitter cold, and the specter of nuclear annihilation. Imagine the frozen wasteland of the Chosin reservoir, where American troops found themselves surrounded by Chinese forces. The Korean War was a brutal stalemate that dragged on for 3 long years. Over 2.5 million people lost their lives, many of them civilians caught in the crossfire. The humid air hangs heavy, thick with the stench of napalm and rotting vegetation. The dense jungle with its towering trees and impenetrable foliage became a living nightmare for those who fought within it. Every step was a struggle, every breath a reminder of the hostile environment that surrounded them. This is the Vietnam War, a conflict that would tear apart a nation and scar a generation. It was a war fought not just on the battlefield, but also in the hearts and minds of those who lived through it. The jungles of Vietnam became a symbol of the war's brutality and the resilience of those who fought there. Vietnam became a battleground in the larger Cold War struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. It was a proxy war, where the superpowers clashed indirectly, each supporting opposing sides. The stakes were high, and the consequences of failure were unthinkable. For American soldiers, Vietnam was unlike any war they had ever fought before. The enemy was not always visible and the terrain was treacherous. The jungle itself seemed to conspire against them with its hidden dangers and relentless heat. The enemy was elusive, the terrain unforgiving, and the political climate back home increasingly hostile. Soldiers faced not only the physical challenges of the jungle, but also the psychological toll of a war that many back home did not support. By the time the war finally ended in 1975, over 3 million people had lost their lives. The cost of the conflict was staggering, both in terms of human lives and the lasting impact on those who survived. The Vietnam War remains a painful reminder of the human cost of conflict and the limits of American power. It is a chapter in history that continues to resonate, a testament to the enduring scars of war and the resilience of the human spirit. Imagine Europe in the 17th century, an age of faith and fervent belief. This was the 30 Years' War, beginning in 1618 as a religious conflict between Catholics and Protestants. It quickly escalated, drawing in other European powers. Imagine vast armies marching across the continent, leaving a trail of destruction. This was a war without rules, where brutality was the norm. Mercenary armies, motivated solely by profit, pillaged their way across the countryside. By the time the guns fell silent in 1648, Europe was a shadow of its former self. The 30 Years' War claimed the lives of an estimated 8 million people. The year is 1917. The Russian Empire, already reeling from World War I, is on the verge of collapse. From the ashes of the Tsarist regime, a brutal and chaotic civil war emerges. On one side stood the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin. On the other, a loose coalition of forces opposed to Bolshevik rule. The Russian Civil War was marked by atrocities committed by all sides. By the time the Civil War ended in 1922, an estimated 5 to 9 million people had perished. The Russian Civil War remains a stark reminder of the human cost of revolution and the dangers of ideological extremism. Deep in the heart of Africa lies the Democratic Republic of Congo, a nation scarred by conflict. This vast country, rich in natural resources, has been the epicenter of one of the deadliest conflicts since World War II. The seeds of this conflict were sown in the colonial era, but the violence escalated following the Rwandan genocide in 1994. The genocide led to a massive influx of refugees and armed groups into Congo, further destabilizing the region. Hutu extremists fled into Congo, sparking a chain reaction of violence. These groups, along with local militias, began to fight for control, leading to widespread chaos and destruction. Multiple armed groups, each with their own agendas, vied for control of Congo's vast mineral wealth. The country's rich deposits of gold, diamonds, and coltan became both a blessing and a curse, fueling the conflict further. The Congo Wars were characterized by extreme brutality and the targeting of civilians. Entire villages were destroyed, and countless lives were lost in the relentless fighting. The conflict destabilized the entire Great Lakes region, drawing in neighboring countries. Nations like Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi became embroiled in the fighting, each pursuing their own interests. Estimates vary, but between 5.4 million and 10 million people are believed to have died. This staggering death toll makes it one of the deadliest conflicts in modern history. The vast majority of these victims were civilians, caught in the crossfire of a war they did not start. Families were torn apart, and children were left orphaned, as the conflict raged on with no end in sight. We've journeyed into the heart of darkness, explored the battlefields of history's most brutal wars, These stories are more than just tales of bloodshed and destruction, they are cautionary tales. As we emerge from this descent into darkness, let us carry with us the lessons learned. Let us remember the victims, honor the sacrifices, and strive to create a world where such horrors are never repeated.